And we're live. Welcome to Daily Confidence for Entrepreneurs. My name is Mustafa Hussaini, and I'm your host for the show. At Daily Confidence for Entrepreneurs, our aim and direction is to provide tips and actionable advice that you could use on a daily basis to boost your confidence in different areas of your business, whether it's mindset, whether it's sales and marketing, appearing online, visibility, branding, finance, you name it. We cover different areas of business and help you boost your confidence in different areas. Now, during the show on a weekly basis, we do a draw and we give away different gifts. And our guest today will give away a gift, and we will give away a gift for you to enter the draw. If you like the show, subscribe to our show on whatever channel you're watching, comment or tag a friend who could benefit from the topic in the conversation that we're discussing. If you ask questions and overall stay engaged during the show, you enter your name in the draw for the giveaway that we're doing. It's the time of year that the year is almost finishing. 2021 is right around the corner, and one way that we help business owners boost their confidence is by helping them boost their confidence through a one-page marketing plan. The problem that we solve is the fact that most business owners are poking around at different marketing tools and ideas, and nothing is really working. So we fix that problem through a simple marketing formula. The next round of simple marketing formula is coming up on the weekend of December 11th to December 13th. That's where we spent 3 days with other business owners to what you might call it, create our one-page marketing plan and know exactly what we're going to do in 2021. And overall, once we're done with the class, the business owners will take a more enjoyable holiday season, knowing exactly what they're going to do in the start of 2021 and for the rest of the year. So my guest today is Steve Morris. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you, Mustafa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you with us. So let me do the proper intro with Steve, and we're going to dive right into it. Today, we've got a really cool topic, and it's about cultivating your personal brand. So your business, regardless of size, is perpetually in the act of shaping its position in the world. This position is based on how your business is experienced through the eyes of your potential customers. In this conversation with Steve, we'll explore what branding is from his perspective and how you can cultivate your personal brand. Steve Morris is a brand and culture advisor, author, and speaker. He's worked with more than 3,000 business leaders and 250 brands, including solopreneurs and small businesses, to evolve their brand. His latest book is entitled The Evolved Brand, and his upcoming book is The Beautiful Business, which will publish in the spring of 2021. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mustafa. It's again, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm thrilled to be on the show.
Likewise, great to have you. We touched base like not long ago, and I really like what you do in this personal brand piece. Is very important, and most business owners that I know don't have this piece figured out. So let's start by your story. What is your story behind what you do now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, going back, I'll give you the abbreviated version of my story. Back in 1994, I was working in agencies in the East Coast of the United States and running, kind of small ad agencies, teams of 40 and 50 people, but I was working like 7 days a week, and 7 days a week when you're in your mid-20s might be fine, but I saw the road ahead, and I knew that road couldn't last very long, at least at that particular pace. And so my wife and I were 1 year married at that point. We packed up everything that we had. We packed it into a Ryder rental truck and moved across country. In fact, we spent our first anniversary, our first day on the road, driving out to San Diego, California, where we knew no one. And, really we were starting over in our life and starting from scratch. And what I thought was, well, San Diego's a big enough city. I'll just get another job. Well, what I didn't know was San Diego was a much smaller city than some of the ones on the East Coast. And the positions that were out here and the kind of agencies that were out here weren't really doing the caliber of work that I was used to doing. So I had some freelance work out of Washington, D.C. and some other places, and I started working out of the house on that freelance work. And back then it was mostly creative work. We didn't really call it brand back in the day, but it was like cultivating the look and feel and what the company stood for and how that was expressed through its marketing. So I had freelance clients, and one thing led to another, and I had more and more freelance clients that I needed additional help, and then I had 2 interns and then 2 employees, and it was time to move out of the house. And again, that was 1994, and about within a year's time, I realized I had some type of company. And so I built and grew that company over the years, and worked on it for 23 years. And in 2017, I sold that company, merged it with another group so I could be doing the work that I do right now, which is really, as you mentioned, brand strategy work, working with organizational leaders to kind of tap into the heart and soul of what are their drivers, their motivations in their work and in their life. Because I think the two parallel, the way most authentic business owners, they merge those two things together and they become much more wholehearted leaders. And so I work with organizations to identify what those deep drivers are, articulate them in such a way that their culture understands them, and then that ultimately the outside world understands them. So I come at this partially from a psychology perspective, studied in Jungian psychology and other psychological attributes, but I also come at it as an artist and a creative. And so I'm trained in design, I'm trained in the world of agencies. And so I kind of merge together the psychological attributes of, how a business leader or a business even operates with the creative side to make great storytelling. And so that's the brief version of my history and sort of the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm. I think we shared some stories and moving to a new city and trying to find your space in there and connecting with other people is a tough job.
Yeah, it is tough.
Moving like San Diego and then finding your place and doing the business, starting from scratch, finding friends and the rest of it is tough. So Steve, what do you mean by branding? How do you define branding?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. There's a lot of confusion around brand, and a lot of people, when they think about what a brand is, I don't know if people can see my hand in air quotes, they think that it's the logo or the identity of the organization. And unfortunately, that's a very partial truth, in that logo can represent certain attributes of the organization. So as we think about like the brand of Nike or Apple, for instance, most people think about the Nike or the Apple logo. Well, the reality is, when you think about Apple or Nike, you're really thinking about how that organization represents themselves and how their customers or customers to be experience that organization. So in my world, the way I think about brand is I think about it is your character. So your brand is your character and your character is your brand. And so the character or the characteristic attributes of Nike or your brand, Mustafa, or my brand, they come through the beliefs that we hold and how we show up in not just the work that we do, but also the human to human interactions. And so we've had great conversations in the past, and we've gotten to know one another. I've gotten to know your character, and you've gotten to know my character.
Yep.
And so you have an impression upon me and the work that I do because of that character, and vice versa. And I think ultimately that imprint that we make on other people, that's your brand, and that comes from your character, and your character comes from your beliefs in action.
So branding is a very broad world and not very easy to understand.
Yeah.
And so one statement that I've learned in the past is, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on this, and that is, your brand is how people feel when they see you or your materials. Is that?
I would go a little bit further than that.
Okay.
Because, we as human beings, the 80% of our sensory input is visual. So you use the word see when they see your materials. But let's say, for instance, someone's watching this particular podcast and this particular conversation, right? So they're not just watching us. they're also listening. They're leaning into the body language. They're leaning into how we say what we say. They're leaning into the information that is contextually aware to them. So really then the brand is the culmination of how someone experiences everything that you put out into the world. So that includes the look and feel of your web page or your identity or the cover of your book. It includes the language that you use on your website. It includes how you show up in, say, social media interactions. It includes how you show up on a podcast or how you show up on a stage if you're doing a keynote presentation, or even how people's first impression of your first meeting with them, if it's in a new business consideration context. That first impression is really all about the brand. And I would say it's multi-sensory, and it's informed by the psychology of how we show up.
Okay, so let me rephrase. Then when they interact with you and your materials and anything and everything they see about you or feel or hear, then I think it's about the interaction and how they feel about it.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
And I would, not just how they feel, but what they think too. Because if I use the word, let's say conscious or conscious leadership, that's an attribute of some of the work that I do. How someone might feel about that is really important.
Absolutely. Okay, that makes sense. So what's the difference between a business brand and personal brand?
Yeah, so the biggest difference between the two really isn't in the componentry, it's in the complexity. So what I mean by that is, if, let's say, for instance, you're a solopreneur, then obviously the brand is your character and how your character shows up into the work that you do. And then obviously, your product offering, your service offering, those kinds of things play a role in that. When you think about an organizational brand, it isn't, the Apple brand isn't, for instance, just about Steve Jobs. It's about the entire organization and what that entire organization and all of what they do represent and what they represent to their customers. So the beautiful thing is, from a solopreneur standpoint or a small business standpoint, you have a lot more control over your brand than, say, a company does. So you think about like reading the headlines of newspapers and things like that. We've all read about some organizations that, a board member or one business leader goes off and does something that is, they're still representative of the company, but they're not the entire company. But people make an impression about, what that one person did, who's part of a, maybe 1,000-person team, but it still has an effect on the brand. And for a solopreneur, the beauty is that, we get to show up and we get to make that impression however we want in all of our daily interactions. But both are still really about the character.
So for what I got is a business brand is more complex than a personal brand, and its personal brand is easier to manage. And especially, I think the bigger you get with the business, the harder it becomes to control your brand.
Absolutely.
Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some people say, and I agree with this to a point, but some people say that your brand isn't really about what you say, it's about what they say.
Right.
And what they mean by that is they is the customer. So you can create an expression, you can intend to express certain things, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to receive it that way. Again, going back to your question, the beautiful thing is that, if you're a solopreneur or a very small business, then you have a lot more ability to control how people perceive you, because you can curate that particular experience with less complexity.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. What is your experience in building your personal brand or working with other people?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think in the introduction to this, this is the bread and butter to what I do, and because I think about it in psychological terms, I think that it's part of our human nature. A big part of brand is really about self-awareness, and so my experience in those things is to delve deep into the drivers, the psychological, the motivational, even the purpose and the vision-driven drivers, to cultivate those things, bring them up above the surface into our realm of self-awareness, and then capture that in such a way that people really understand it. And again, you live in the world of marketing, so you're going to understand this really. So that, marketing is not really about you. It's all about them. And really, ultimately, good marketing is about what's in it for them. And so it's about the promise or the value that your product or service and your ability to articulate that what's in it for them. Brand is similar to that, because you're not just creating a brand in a vacuum. You're creating a brand so that other people understand what it is that you stand for. And you cultivate, or I do, the work that I do cultivates these deeply held beliefs and then brings them into a language system first and into a visual system second, so that people understand and can react in the right kinds of ways. And so I've done this for hundreds of companies, and I am incredibly honored to do this work in the world.
And so I guess you also wrote a book on this.
Oh yeah.
And so what's the book about?
So the previous book, or the book that's out in the world right now, not the book that's coming out in the world next year, is called The Evolved Brand. And The Evolved Brand takes kind of building on what we've talked about here. And I think about the Darwinism aspects of human evolution, and how, we as a human species, we do our best when we're evolving into our next iteration and we're collaborating with the people around us. And the wonderful thing about the world of business is that it's never done in a vacuum. And because we get to evolve not just how we do what we do, but the kind of language set that we articulate out into the world. So an evolved brand comes from someone who has a high level of either self-awareness or consciousness, depending on how someone understands that term. And they walk through the world with deep self-awareness. And self-awareness happens on two levels, one of which is I understand first my internal drivers and motivations. And secondarily, I understand how those drivers and how I show up in the world affect other people around me. And so an evolved brand process dovetails those two things together with a high degree of consciousness and creates an offering that has a promise built within it.
So for those who are watching or listening later, Steve and I are talking about cultivating your personal brand, which is very important as a business owner or as a business altogether. You got to have to define what your brand is and what you stand for. And once you do that, I think growing and scaling becomes easier once you know, once you identify your brand. So, and Steve has been doing this for a long time, and he's obviously an expert at this. Steve, if somebody's listening, what practical advice, or what would your first 2 or 3 steps be for someone that is trying to develop their personal brand?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really depends on where the individual is. So I think it begins with really understanding what is the chasm between where your current brand currently sits and where your aspirational brand, or where you want your brand to be, right? So if you haven't done any work on brand, the first question is to understand, well, what is it that I first and foremost most deeply believe? And so I talk a lot about purpose. So what is your driving purpose in life? And the question that I love to ask is, aside from making money, why does your business deserve to exist on this planet? And I say it in that way intentionally to be a little bit provocative. I'm not trying to insult anyone to say the word deserve. But we all know that the world doesn't need yet another business. What the world needs is problems solved that are unique to how the individual shows up and solves them. And so it's kind of like this beautiful intersection of how my own individual skill set and personal genius is, how it meets what the world actually needs. And so an examination around what that intersection is I think the first step. So what is it that I most believe in myself? How do I want to live my life? What are my driving purposes in life? Or what is my singular driving purpose in life? And then turn that question outward into, what does the world need of those genius-oriented thing or very special things that I can actually deliver on? And so that's the first step. And so the articulation then around what is my purpose then ideally distills down into a single sentence. I'm in the business to, fill in the blank, or the essence of my business is to fill in the blank. And I have a little tool that I help people through, and anybody could do this. So, and it's called the brand essence tool. So I'll just very, very quickly. So 5 times you write down the answer to the question, what businesses am I in? I'll repeat that. What business am I in? So you write that down, but you cannot repeat your answer. So if you say, well, I'm in the business of marketing, okay, so then you move on. That's answer number 1. Then you go into the next one. I'm in the business of connecting humans, so you go on, and you do that 5 times. And then the 5th one is probably the closest thing to the truth of the business that you're actually in. So that's called the brand essence tool.
The 5th one.
Yes, the 5th one.
So it was what you write down 5 or 6 times. What business or what businesses am I in?
No, what single business am I in? And you cannot repeat the answer.
What business am I in? I am taking notes here. I took a couple of good nuggets. Like the other question that you said, why do you deserve to exist?
Yeah. Beyond making money, beyond profit.
That's a really good one to answer. And so what is your experience with this? People having a hard time answering that question?
Oh, it's really hard. Really, really hard to do on your own. Which is why I stay so busy at what I do. But it's I think the toughest thing to do, as the saying goes, you can't read the label of the bottle from the inside of the bottle, right? So when we work on ourselves, it's really hard to understand why we do what we do and how we show up in the world without some feedback mechanism. And so sometimes just, teaming up with a close friend or an ally, someone who understands what drives you, what makes you tick, to have them work with you on some of these questions. And then the other thing you could do is you could poll the people that are closest in your world and ask them to tell you a story of you at your best at your work. So, this is an exercise I take a lot of leaders through, where you tap 20 of your closest colleagues, people that know you and have worked with you, and you ask them the question to have them tell you a story at you at your best, and just one story. And then what you do is you take those 20 stories and you look for similarities within and commonalities within those stories. And because we just don't know, I find it utterly beautiful and shocking that we just don't really know the wonderful effects we have on people until sometimes we hear that from those people who are closest to us.
Very important. I love those two. Those were golden nuggets for me from this conversation. Like, why do you deserve to exist? What does your business deserve to exist aside from making money? And then the second one was, what business am I in?
Yeah,
that was a really good one.
Yeah,
I'm actually going to work on that today myself.
Yeah,
and try to answer that question.
There is to answer it at least 5 times, because the first answer is the superficial or obvious answer, which isn't really the truth. So the reason that we're getting to the truth is that we're distilling to the essence of the business that we're in.
Love it. So I know that you're sharing a gift here with people that are watching or listening. Tell us about your gift, please.
Yeah, I have this toolkit that I've developed for small businesses and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, that it has within it, part and parcel to the things that we're talking about, a whole slew of guidelines and tools of how to do some of this work on your own, and what I actually mean by brand. And not just that, the book doesn't just define brand, it defines what a brand purpose is, a brand vision is, a brand values are, brand promises, and it gives you tools within it to help you figure out how to create the language of those things on your own.
Beauty. Love it. Love it. For those of you who are watching or listening, Steve's gift, a branding toolkit that he is sharing with us, is you can go to dailyconference.show/gifts, and the link to access the gift is right in there. So go in there and get access to this toolkit. so you become more aware of your branding. And what is the value of this gift that you're sharing, Steve?
Oh my goodness. It's, monetarily, I have no idea. These are the tools that I've cultivated over, 25 years of doing this. And I've tried to distill them down into, a 20-page document that can have people walk through this process that I, guide lots of organizations through and have done so many, many, many times. And so they can do it on their own. They can do it even with a small team of people or some, like in a mastermind group or something like that. These tools are a complete giveaway. They're kind of some of my secret sauce and special insights to how to do this without, a highly paid expert like myself.
Love it. That's a very valuable and generous gift that you're sharing. For those of you who join us and are watching or listening later, we're talking about personal branding, and we're going to do a draw later. And for you to enter the draw, you need to comment, ask questions, like and subscribe to the show, or leave a review on Apple, Google, or Spotify later for our podcast. Steve, if you had a Facebook ad that everyone on the planet would see, what would your ad say?
Oh, interesting. It might say something like, no business will ever be more evolved than its leaders. And the reason I think that is important is that we as human beings are constantly evolving. Mm-hmm. And the truth of that is that, in order for our business to evolve, we as individuals have to evolve. So a lot of this is very self-work. So it would say something very provocative like that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, Steve, really quick, what are some of one or two favorite books that you usually recommend for people to read?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Eric Fromm, The Art of Being Human, I think is a really great book if people who are into psychology. I'm an avid reader of Seth Godin, his new book, which is called, I'm totally blanking on it, but it's on my bookshelf, but I can't see it from here. Well, he's got a great book on This Is Marketing, and which is very plain speak about what marketing is and isn't. But his new book is really all about shipping creative work, and the title is surpassing me right now for some reason. But it's all about how to be a creative or a business artist and how to put your work out into the world with generosity, by the way. So that book is I've been gifting it to a lot of people, and of course my book I give to lots of people too. My Evolve Brand book is a book that I give frequently.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Steve, I really appreciate you your time and joining us and sharing your expertise with us and with our audience. For those of you who would like to learn more about personal branding and your company branding and this whole piece, which is very important. And in my experience in 10 or 15 years in marketing and business, well over 98% of businesses and business owners don't have this figured out. So go out there, claim Steve's gift, and get access to the toolkit to get more awareness, and work with him and hire him as an expert and work with him to, figure out your branding piece for your business, and maybe get his book and read it. And he's got another one coming up in spring. Steve, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you and your time and your generous gift, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Mustafa, thank you so much. I appreciate you and the time here today.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Now, for those of you who are watching or listening later, daily Conference for Entrepreneurs show, our workshop for simple marketing formulas coming up on the weekend of December 11th through 13th. This is a 3-day workshop that is valued at $2,000, and we are literally giving it away. If you want to build your one-page marketing plan for 2021 and know exactly what you're going to do to grow and scale your business, you want to check the link here in the show notes and in the comments below on the live show, depending on what platform you're watching through. and go register for free. It is literally free. We're giving it away. And the catch is you just need to show up, right? We're looking for business owners that are committed and serious, and they want to simplify their marketing and grow and scale their business. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this show. If you have any questions and if you want us to discuss certain topics about your business confidence in different parts of business, leave a comment below, and we'll do our best to either bring an expert to talk about that the topic, or I'll talk about it myself and share my 2 cents on that. My name is Mustafa Hosseini, your host for Daily Confidence for Entrepreneurs, and thanks for joining us, and have yourself a great day. Bye now.